Well, Attorney General Pam Bondi is facing intensifying bipartisan pressure for the calamitous handling of the Epstein files. Bondi claimed the so-called Epstein client list, which many imagined as a record of high-profile abusers he blackmailed, was sitting on her desk. The administration now says there is no list, there was no blackmail, and that the release of prison videotapes proves he took his own life.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
Well, I think that's probably the textbook definition of what it means to be a grifter, trying to profit off of dead children by pumping NordVPN and your promo code. It's reprehensible. I'm
Just to be
pretty
clear,
sure
that's not
you're
my
an
promo code,
atheist.
that's
You
not
don't
the
believe
definition
in
of a
God.
grifter.
You certainly
Okay,
don't believe in traditional marriage.
Will you admit that? Will you admit that the budget is out of control and that Trump did absolutely nothing? Will you admit that? Will you admit that the budget is out of control and Trump did that? He failed completely.
How long have you and I been doing TV together?
A long time.
How many times have I complained about government spending?
No,
listen to what I'm saying.
Government spending. It's Donald Trump. Your party has a moral failing
You're a
that they're
psychopath
allocating budget appropriately. You're talking about trying to find kids in Texas while you've got horses galloping across MacArthur Park, paid for by the federal government, Donald Trump's federal government.
Go Google the size of the Comfort, Texas City Hall. You can't fit hundreds of people in any meeting there, you moron.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so if you were tired of talking about Jeffrey Epstein, get over it, because it's here to stay for a little while, because MAGA is outright pissed. We're being gaslit into oblivion by the very people that promised us deliverance. We're going to get accountability for this, and we're not getting anything. And we've got a pretty good panel coming up here. We got Brian Tyler Cohen, Destiny, who shows himself once again to be utterly despicable. But we'll get into all that, y'all. But before we do all that, y'all do me a favor and smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here and you like these types of videos. Check out my regular videos. We go over news and politics and everything in between, essentially. Y'all share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. And if you could, look right below the video and click that join button. Sign up, become a member, help this channel explode and expand and grow so we can prosper, y'all. But without any further ado, here we go.
I had one of the administration on Uncensored, Alina had. But let's remind people what she told me literally like 2-3 months ago.
It is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
Is it going to be shocking?
I don't see how it's not shocking that there were so many individuals that were hidden and kept secret and not been held accountable. Let's talk about the reverse. I believe in accountability. So you have to now go through your process. Now, I won't say they're guilty until they go through their time in court. But again, now it's time for accountability. We have seen for so many years, Piers, in this country, many investigations, subpoenas, testimonies in Congress, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a general frustration with accountability. We take it halfway, we don't take it home. And I really believe that now with Cash and Pam, there will be accountability.
Now, Ben, that clip has had millions and millions of views this week, understandably, because there's a massive disconnect between what she told me there and what Pam Bondi was saying and what others were saying and what's actually materialized in the last 48 hours. Senator Cruz there very firmly that he wants everything put out and he wants criminal action taken against those who broke the law. What's your view?
Couldn't agree more. Look, I think there's transparency the American people deserve, but not just the American people, most importantly, the victims. They deserve to not have this be covered up in any capacity or for people to just stop looking. I don't know if there's certain information that has disappeared or wasn't there that they thought was there, but at the end of the day, all that we do have needs to be put out there in a responsible way. You have to protect the victims. That is something that's extremely important. And so it's got to be done in an orderly way. But there are too many people that have talked about this on the record saying that there's a lot of stuff out there to then all of a sudden say, all right, well, maybe we don't have it. Maybe it's not there. Whatever the story is, give it to everyone the same way and make sure you protect those victims. But they deserve justice. And I don't think this is going to be the end of the story. I think there's far too many people that are asking the questions that you just mentioned, that the senator mentioned, that I'm mentioning, And this should be nonpartisan. This should be non-political. You have children that apparently were sex trafficked and abused in horrific ways. That has nothing to do with politics. It should come out whether the people that were the perpetrators of this were liberal or conservative or agnostic. It doesn't matter. You need to protect the victims, and we need to make sure things like this never, ever, ever, ever happen again.
Right. Brian Tyler Cohen, I mean, I do think it's a nonpartisan issue. Obviously, nothing is these days, but I do think that it is completely baffling to me, just as a journalist, that you have this extraordinary scandal that rages away for many years. The main perpetrator dies in prison and is believed to have taken his own life, but the only person that's actually been made criminally accountable and is now languishing in prison is Ghislaine Maxwell, his kind of madame figure, who's a woman. So none of the other men who are widely believed to have been involved in this, none of them have been made accountable. What's your view of this?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that this is a con job by this administration. All of these people, Kash Patel, Alina Habba, Dan Bongino, Donald Trump, all of them came forward and said that this was a priority for them because they were stringing their supporters along. And then the moment they get into power, here we are in a situation where the whole thing is just closed and we have no further information on this. And yet, look, I think it would be fools to be surprised. I mean, this is a guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who Trump himself palled around with for years. This is a guy who Epstein himself called his closest friend.
Kicked him out of his club.
This is a guy who Jeffrey Epstein said was his closest friend for 10 years. This is a guy who Donald Trump appointed as his Secretary of Labor, Alex Acosta, who handed him a sweetheart deal, a non-prosecution agreement where he was out of prison 6 out of 7 days a week. So, look, Trump can say what he wants on the campaign trail in the lead up when he needs to get everybody's votes and pander to the base. But at the end of the day, he's the guy in charge. And suddenly the about face from everybody in his administration, the buck falls to one person. It's not Alina Habba or Carolyn Levitt or Dan Bongino or Kash Patel. It's Trump himself.
Now, shockingly enough, I would have to agree with most of that. He did pander to the base a lot, saying we're going to get this and we're going to get that, and we're getting nothing. As a matter of fact, we were promised this over and over and over again. Oh, you're going to be shocked when all of this comes out. And now, for some reason, we're getting this veiled insinuation that, oh, Trump was involved. That's why it's not coming out. Well, if you ask, and I get comments all the time like, well, if Trump is innocent, how come they won't release the files? For some reason, people think that all because they won't release the files, that, Trump's guilty. Well, the follow-up question to that, logically at least if you're not Trump deranged, should be then the Biden administration sat on this for 4 years. They threw everything. I said this yesterday, as a matter of fact. They threw everything they could at Donald Trump, including creating falsities and throwing at Donald Trump to try to make it stick. Why would they just look at all of this if he's so guilty? Like, oh, hang on, we can get him for decades in prison time, a good prison sentence here. He was involved with Jeffrey Epstein. No, we're just going to leave that alone. We'll just keep this on the hush-hush, and let's just make up charges and throw at Donald Trump. Yeah, freaking right. Get out of here with that nonsense, y'all. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I mean, Destiny, it is fascinating to see how a lot of the most diehard Trump supporters in the kind of podcast, YouTube, influencer world, they've turned pretty vengefully against him and the administration over this. What do you make of it?
So here's the reality. The reality is, I keep hearing people like Joe Rogan saying the conspiracy theorists ended up being right about everything. They weren't. They were wrong about basically every single thing. There was no massive election fraud. There were no mass deaths from the COVID vaccine. There is no evidence that it was manufactured in a laboratory. There is no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered by somebody. The reality is every single thing I said is true, and I will debate you on any platform.
The one on instant virology you're saying wasn't true. That's where you lose credibility.
You have
well,
no idea.
Well, hang on, Destiny. hang on. Destiny, hang on.
Please stop.
Stupid.
Hang on, Destiny.
Let me finish my point. Excuse me. Let me finish my point. The problem is that the problem is that you guys spent so much time spreading these conspiracies that when you finally wound up, sir, I don't even know if you know. Do you even believe that viruses and germs are real? I'm not actually sure. Please stop.
I do.
The problem
and
is that conservatives spent all this time. Conservatives spent all this time.
You would understand
conservatives spent all. Well, if you want to bring me on your show, we'll talk about it anytime, anywhere. Okay. Conservatives spent all this time.
I don't insult my audience with stupid
Well,
comments.
hang on. Let me jump in. Let me just jump in on this point.
Excuse me. Can I wait? Hold on. Wait.
Destiny. Let me wait. Well, you made a series of statements there about.
And I'm almost over like one sentence.
All right.
Conservatives spent all this time with all these conspiracies, and then as soon as they got into office and they no longer had a deep state to blame, all of a sudden there was no election fraud evidence. There was no evidence about Hunter Biden being conspiratorial, with Ukraine or Russia. There was no evidence of Epstein being murdered, and that's what's happened.
Okay.
They are now the deep state. They have every part of the government under control, and they have no evidence for any of their claims.
Here's the problem.
That's it.
Here's the problem. You've made a series of statements there, alleging that all these things are pure conspiracy theories and there's no evidence for it. And yet it is widely now accepted that actually it is more likely than not that the coronavirus, COVID-19, was started in that lab. That is now widely accepted. That's not a conspiracy theory.
It's not. It
began as a conspiracy theory.
I promise you, there is no scientific evidence. There is no compelling intelligence community evidence that is the case.
So you think, Destiny, to be clear,
away all the samples.
Hang on. You've had your say. Let me have mine. Let me finish my sentence. No, here's the thing, Destiny. You think it's literally a conspiracy theory that COVID-19, which was originally said to have started in a wet market 1 mile from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, where it later transpired they were testing new coronaviruses. You think it is more likely it started with a bat in the wet market next door than it started in the lab where they're literally testing new coronaviruses? You think that's a mad conspiracy? Because I would say the mad conspiracy is that it's the bat a mile away.
I'm gonna go with the wet market that was 30 minutes away in a densely populated city where all of the first cases started.
It's less than a mile away.
Sponsored by the Chinese Communist Party. I'm just curious.
30 minutes away. Chinese Communist Party. Sir, you are an absolute idiot. I can't believe you say that.
Is it like when you do your shows brought to you by the Chinese Communist Party?
Just to be clear, it's funny that you say Communist Party, right? Just to be clear, the residents of Kerr County, for the floods that we were just discussing, rejected utilizing ARPA funds for years to put up. It's so funny. Ted Cruz talked about an emergency siren system. They didn't want to use money from the Biden administration because of all of these crazy conspiracies that you guys spread about things like COVID, because they thought if they accepted the money, the transcripts are public. The transcripts are public, sir. I'm sorry, hold on. Are you telling me they didn't say that? Are you telling me they didn't say that?
We're kicking your ass and you made up something to try to go back and use kids that have died in a tragedy to cover the fact that you cannot defend your Wuhan point of view because it's made out of Chinese communist propaganda. I think everyone watching can see that now. And I think you realize you stepped in it and you said something that wasn't true. And everyone that has a brain on this panel is calling you out for it because it was such a stupid thing to say. I'm sorry that happened to you, but you don't use kids dying in a flood to try to cover for your dumbass comment.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
By the way, I want to bring the others in. I want to bring the others in too. Hang on. Don't all shout at once.
So everybody can see who's running from it, okay?
Don't all shout at once. Let me bring Brian back in here. See, this is the interesting thing, I think, Brian. I read what Joe Rogan put out about conspiracy theories. He was really saying, what he was saying was, don't just dismiss them all out of hand, was his real theme about this. Because a lot of things are alleged to be conspiracy theories, and the COVID lab one is a classic example where that began as being something that could get people cancelled if they even dared suggest it, and is now, the US CIA believes that a research-related origin in Wuhan in the lab is more likely than the theory it came from animals. So the CIA now believe that. So it's no longer a conspiracy theory.
Okay, Destiny has proven himself to be just completely and utterly captured by appeal to authority, right? If this is what the corporate press narrative is, and there's just the least shred of facts or evidence to kind of support whatever the corporate press is saying, we're just going to dismiss all conspiracy theories, any other evidence that may be out there. He is so afraid to be called a conspiracy theorist that he just ignore reality, ignore logic, ignore vast amounts of evidence to point in another direction, right? Like, all the evidence shows that this did not come from the wet market, that it came from a lab. Now, once again, I am not a virologist. I haven't investigated this on my own, independently, if you will, so I'm just going based upon what I've seen. So this is just an opinion. It's not a fact statement. So I don't want YouTube to get me in any kind of trouble for trying to convince people of anything. Go do your own research and then follow up questions with a virologist and somebody who's investigated all this, which is exactly what I did. But don't believe me, because I'm just a guy on YouTube, right? I'm just an internet guy. But Destiny just refuses to believe any other evidence outside of what the corporate press is saying. And I love it. And he'll use all kinds of excuses as to why this is. You gotta love how these people, they just buy into the manipulation, right? Which is antithetical to what I do on this channel, because I point out all the corporate press manipulations constantly on a daily basis. And it's just fascinating to watch people like this just buy into that life. But let's keep going, because this thing gets pretty good, yo.
I think it goes to a wider point, is that take the Epstein story, right? I don't know whether he took his life or was murdered or whatever. It seems that most people who've looked at this professionally believe he took his life. But there's this weird video with the missing minute and Pam Bondi's torturous explanation for what that may be about. There's also the undeniable fact that he surrounded himself with a myriad number of famous, rich, powerful people who would have a vested interest in shutting him up. That is indisputable. There are also all these rumors flying around, which, even Alan Dershowitz thought there may be some merit to this when I interviewed him on Monday, that he may have been some kind of Israeli Mossad agent of some sort. You put all this together, and again, it's very easy to say, well, it's all a conspiracy theory, to say that he did anything other than he took his life and nobody else was involved. There's no client list. Nobody else abused these girls. It's over. I don't think that's the conspiracy theory. The conspiracy that's going on right now, it seems to me, is a conspiracy of shutting this down, of silencing debate about it, wanting to move on, and for actually nobody other than Ghislaine Maxwell to be held accountable when it is. I mean, look, take Prince Andrew. Right, in my country, Prince Andrew paid Virginia Giuffre a reported $11 million, right, but claimed he never met her, right? But there's a photograph of him with his arm around her when she was 17, 18 in a London townhouse. Now, call me a conspiracy theorist, but you don't give $11 million to someone you've never met, right? I don't care who you are. So, again, a lot of the stuff swirling around here doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't think it's good enough for people just to say it's all conspiracy theory. So shut up and move on. Your thoughts?
I would completely agree. And in fact, we saw yesterday when the White House was posed these questions, Trump freaked out and said, whoa, why are we still talking about this? Like, can't we talk about something? You've got Donald Trump, who has spent every waking minute of the past almost decade talking about the water pressure in his shower and toilet. That guy suddenly doesn't want to engage in a topic that he's spoken about before. We've heard him go on and on about immigrants being rapists and murderers every day. We've heard him go on and on for the better part of a decade about Hillary Clinton's crimes and the Biden crime family. This guy repeats himself like to the ends of the earth. And yet on the issue of Epstein, which by the way was an issue that his campaign predicated so much of their focus on, that they garnered so much support from their audience based on, now he doesn't want to talk about it. So yeah, I mean, I guess the expression that would come to mind is a hit dog will holler.
Well, also, again, I'll repeat, this follows just literally whatever it was 3-4 weeks ago, Elon Musk in their big public spat suddenly posting, the big bombshell is that Trump's in the Epstein file. So it might be
a move, by the way, that started a conversation about deporting Elon Musk, in case you were wondering whether there was any there. So yeah, I mean, clearly that he hit a mark by or he hit a nerve by saying stuff like that. But I mean, for this administration to try and brush it under the rug. And Natalie, I do agree with what you said about there being a lot of grifters. I mean, we've seen Dan Bongino and Kash Patel focus so much energy energy, so many resources, so much time on this exact issue, only for them to come out and say, oh, well, there's, there's absolutely nothing here. But I would also caution, Natalie, to not put the onus, because I've been seeing this more and more on the right, to not put all of the responsibility on Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is an appendage of Donald Trump. She is not calling the shots. Nobody in this administration is calling the shots. This entire cabinet, this entire White House exists to serve Donald Trump. They exist to basically be extensions of Trump himself, and no one will ever act independently of him. And so if accountability is really what you're looking for here, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume that this is all being done in good faith, then let's not delude ourselves into thinking that Pam Bondi is the final word or that the buck stops with her, when the buck always stops with Donald Trump.
Yes, Brian. That is how government works. Go read the Constitution if you don't believe me, but all the power of the executive branch is vested in a single person. That is the President of the United States. So yes, the buck stops with Donald Trump. Now, I understand you guys were cheering and screaming, and Joe Biden was the best thing since vanilla ice cream, but Joe Biden was clearly not in charge. He could not run the country. That is why you had all of his cabinet members seem like they were operating independently, because there was no brain. They had to have their own opinions, their own plans and whatnot on how to run the government, because there was nobody in charge. The head of the snake was cut off, for goodness sakes. Like, maybe you got used to that. Maybe that's kind of scary that we got used to, the president, oh, he's just incapacitated over here. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's fine. Yeah, I like the fact that we now have a president who is running the show, who is calling the shots, who the cabinet answers to, right? Because he is the only person that the entirety of the electorate of the United States votes for. He is the one single representative of the people within the federal government. He's the only one. That's it. So yes, I would hope he is in charge. I would hope he is running the show. It doesn't look like it, though, when it comes to the Epstein files. Can we all agree with that? That something is going on here. Something much deeper than Donald Trump, the buck stops with Donald Trump is going on with this, right? Donald Trump is trying to obfuscate, is what it looks like to me, by coming out and saying, well, blah, 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 blah. Y'all still talking about this? Yes, we're still talking about this because we want accountability. Like, everybody loves to dip off into the Jeffrey Epstein off himself. I don't care about that, to be honest with you. Hey, look, if you got the evidence to show that that's what he did, even though I've seen evidence to prove that it would be very, very, very hard to do so, and it's highly unlikely that he didn't off himself, but that's what you're saying? Look, I trust Kash Patel, but they're pissed. Dan Bongino threatened to quit the other day, or reportedly threatened to quit the other day. So, look, I trust Dan Bongino on this. He says that's what happened. Look, I'm going to go with that. That's over for me. You can close that door behind me. I don't care about that. We want accountability, like we've been saying. There were many, many victims, and there were many powerful figures in this world, all over the world, right, that were involved with this, that we want accountability for. That's it. I don't care about no client list, none of that stuff. I want to see indictments, and I think we can all agree to that. Let's keep going.
Agree. And Destiny, I'm going to take you off. Hang on, Destiny. I'm going to ask you a question.
She said in 2020,
Destiny, I'm going to ask you a question. So
this was under Biden? I'm pretty sure that was under Trump. So if you want to blame anybody for the censorship, it would have been Trump. I know.
Let me ask you a question, Destiny.
Who's president there? But
Destiny, I want to ask you a question. So a woman called Kylie Jane Kramer posted on X, I've been trying to wrap my head around how the flooding in Texas became so devastating so quickly. Why not evacuate? Then I saw this. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick said the Guadalupe River rose 26 feet in just 46 minutes around 4 a.m. That doesn't even seem natural. To which you reposted this, and you put your own words. I heard God killed those kids because they were using NordVPN, promo code Destiny, to get around the Texas porn ban. On reflection, do you think that was grotesquely tasteless thing to be posting?
Absolutely not. The hand wringing here. Oh my God! Stop. If you want to talk about dead children, then you should talk about the residents of Kerr County who rejected using ARPA funds to build the very siren system that Ted Cruz was over here virtue signaling about. Now that the kids are dead, last I checked, the siren system isn't bringing anybody back to life. Okay, the very same system that they could have built for the better part of the last decade. They didn't want to touch those ARPA funds because they thought that if they did, Biden would go and steal their homes, which is the exact same lie that was told in North Carolina when people were rejecting FEMA funds because they thought that if the government was giving them money for their houses, they'd steal it. If you want to talk about grotesque and ghoulish things that are being said,
it's what you put online. I agree with you. It's what you run online. It is grotesque. It's disgusting. But I mean, I guess that's what you do.
How long have people like you told us that if we spend less money in Ukraine, you guys are going to spend more money investing in things like infrastructure in the United States? Where is that money going?
We just had another
massive debt increase. Another massive debt increase for more tax cuts for wealthy people. Congratulations. Thank you so much.
All right, let me get a Ben.
How's that deficit doing?
Don't talk over each other.
How's our deficit doing? Is it going up or down?
Don't talk over each other. But just to be clear, Destiny, you don't.
No answers.
Just to be clear, Destiny.
I'm going to talk.
Please stop talking.
I'm not going to sit here and argue about jokes when these guys are spreading lies that are leading to the actual destruction of these. Oh, except you guys do when it happens in LA when it's about the wildfires. You guys make jokes when politicians are getting killed in Minnesota.
Go look at my ex account.
Just the rest of your party is. Just the rest of your party is.
Don't talk over each other because we can't hear you.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
All right. But Destiny, just to be clear, Destiny, just to be clear, you don't regret posting. I heard God kill those kids because they were using NordVPN to get around the Texas porn ban.
While you allow the very same misinformation to spread on this program that leads to people not putting up siren systems, okay, because they think that Biden is going to go steal their homes.
That wasn't my question.
I think it is absolutely insane.
Wasn't my question.
It's insane that you want to go and hand-wring liberals over jokes that are not even half as crazy as some of the things these conservatives say.
Okay, but just to be clear, you don't regret doing it.
There's no tweet like that out there.
Just to be clear, Destiny,
absolutely not.
Just to be clear, you don't regret posting it.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
See, this goes to what I was talking about earlier. Destiny right here. He goes down the corporate press narrative line here and then starts to correlate a whole bunch of statements from people and actions, as a matter of fact, of not getting the sirens or whatever because, you know, they didn't want to spend the money on these sirens. And he correlates all these unrelated things and puts them all together and then comes up with this sadistic idea that, hey, let's put this joke out here that these people did not want to get the sirens because they were using VPNs. Like, what are you even talking about, my dude? Like, this is just nuts. This dude is sick. He's a really sick individual, and it's really hard to believe that he would think that that kind of a joke is okay to make such a joke about some kids that died tragically. It's fascinating, the mind of some of these liberals. Once again, folks, these liberals, you know, there is no correlating ideology here. It's not about Marxism, not about critical theory or anything like that. It's all about hate. They hate this country. They hate MAGA. They hate you. They hate everything. They hate Donald Trump. They just want to see this country burn to the freaking ground, and they could care less who gets in the way. Let's keep going.
Claire, you're saying that there aren't
talking about the field for a second?
You're saying
let him finish,
like 15 times. So you're saying there are no citizens saying that they don't want to use the American Rescue Plan funds. They didn't want to use that money because they thought Biden would take their homes.
I'm going to go back to what I said.
That transcript doesn't exist.
Can you let Ben finish, given he was talking about the funerals of dead children?
I have friends whose kids
Please let him finish what he was saying.
He doesn't care. As long as he admits he doesn't give a fuck about the dead kids. That's okay.
You know what, Destiny? You don't give a fuck about the dead kids, do you?
Admit it. I do.
Because you thought it was funny. You thought it was funny.
I'm not the one voting to take money away from these things.
You thought it was funny to go on X and talk about, I heard God kill those kids because they weren't using a NordVPN to get around the Texas porn ban. That is disgusting. You're the one using dead children in a grotesque manner. So let me just lay that down for the record.
Just to be clear, let me lay it down as well. How many people did my joke kill?
No, it's just disgustingly tasteless.
Exactly.
You're a sick man.
And then how many kids died because there's no siren system because people like this guy over here made up the lie that Biden was going to steal your homes if you accept American Rescue Plan. If you accept American Rescue Plan money. Exactly.
I never made that up.
The difference is
I would like to hear Ben. I would like to hear Ben finish the story he was telling us when he was talking about the funerals of dead children. So let him finish that, please.
Would it be nice if we didn't have the funerals? Wouldn't that be better?
Can we mute him?
Rather than you talking about why you were right to crack a sick joke. Ben.
Okay. I go back to the point here. This flood did not ask if you were liberal or conservative, rich or poor, black or white, or anything else in between. People lost their lives, and many people lost their lives trying to save kids in an unprecedented flood. If we could go back, I'm sure this community would have said, we'll figure out a way to have the money. You're dealing with an area that has a lot of volunteer first responders and firefighters. Can I finish, please? Like, maybe you'll learn something and not be such a tool.
You just lie.
You don't live there. You don't know. You've never been there. I've been there. I've talked to people. You don't know anybody that died in this flood. You're a POS. That's who you are. I would like to finish my point, Piers.
Finish it, Ben.
Thank you. There are people that died in this flood helping try to save the lives of others. There are elderly that died. I know people that lost children in this flood. They would love to go back and have a different warning system. By the way, we don't know if the warning system would have changed anything at all. The warnings came out early. Unfortunately, there's spotty cell phone there. Everyone's talked about this. I'm sure there's people in the community that wish they would have maybe done something different in the past. Hindsight's 2020. But to say that the community decided not to do this because of some insane theory you've come up with, which is not true or based in fact. It was based on a small rural community with not a lot of tax base and a very expensive price tag for something. And for you to sit here and to somehow decide that this is a place to say something so sick. I'm assuming you don't have kids. I have 6-year-old and 8-year-old kids. If you talk to parents that are planning their child's funerals are happening tomorrow and the next day here in Houston, I think you would have a little bit of a soul and a heart for them. But instead, you're out here putting this crap out there. And it's really sad. I hope you get help.
So when Destiny does decide to theorize a little bit on a conspiracy that may have happened, it's way off the rails, way off track, off course, and very, very, very distasteful, I must say. Let's keep going.
And if you had any humanity about you would delete it. But that's entirely your decision. But Brian, I've seen this on the other side too. I've seen this during the Biden administration when terrible things happen, that there's a race for people to get political, to play a race card or play this card or play that card, or just show a shocking inhumanity. And it's the very worst of society when that happens. What do we do about this? I think it's fueled by social media. People wouldn't be able to get the audience for this kind of thing without TikTok, without Facebook, without X and so on. But it's a sick thing that this goes on when these terrible tragedies happen.
Look, I obviously can't speak for what some random person on the internet tweeted about Camp Mystic. All I can say is look, I try to have some sense of the fact that there are as many Republicans in California as there are in Texas, and there are as many Democrats in Texas as there are in major big blue bastions. And so I try to focus on that and recognize that a lot of these people are a lot of these people are fighting against the same system that I would be fighting against, and I would obviously not attack folks in Texas, but I would point out that Ben said that these storms aren't partisan, and that we have to try. I can't remember what Ben said, but the reality is that while the wildfires were raging in California, Ben and Ted had a podcast where they just attacked where they attacked Governor Newsom and Karen Bass, and that was while the fires were still raging. And so, spare us the grandstanding and the virtue signaling about how this stuff doesn't get partisan. This was here's Ted Cruz's tweet. Right now, everyone is horrified watching the LA wildfires. In today's episode of Verdict, we break down the catastrophic policy decisions made by Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass. While the wildfires were still raging in Los Angeles, while I was standing on my roof in LA, spraying down my house with a hose to make sure that my house wouldn't set on fire when the fire was down the street within 1 mile of my house.
Did you listen to the show?
And so Ted Cruz decided to come out and make make his entire episode, which, by the way, there is not.
So I'll tell you what we said, because I was on that show.
Excuse me, let him finish. We were crying so much about people interrupting. Let him finish.
I know. Ben is arguing for Destiny.
You said we did a show. You're putting words in our mouth of something we didn't say.
I read the tweet verbatim. That's
did
what I did.
You listen to the show? No,
I actually.
So I'll tell you what we did.
Did you watch the Lifetime movie? Did you see the documentary?
What we did was we talked about the decisions that were made.
There's not a situation where Ted Cruz will not.
Well, let Ben say what he thinks he said. Let's listen to Ben.
I'll redo the show in a very quick form. What we talked about were the decisions that were made with underbrush not being cleared out and the massive warnings that were coming. We also talked about what the fire chief said about those warnings. We talked about the lack of water pressure. We talked about them cleaning up some of the holding tanks. We talked about also the fact that there were certain things that were done to save fish over having the ability to fight these types of fires and everything that went into it. We talked about the decisions that were made that then made for a poor response that made you have to be on your roof, as you described it, spraying down because there wasn't adequate decisions that were made with those winds that came through with the underbrush.
You think the reason that I was on my roof was because while the Santa Ana winds were ripping through LA at 100 miles per hour and 50,000 acres of LA were burning, that some bogus fucking story about the smelt, about Delta smelt is why LA was burning? You're a joke, bro. You have no idea what you were talking about. You have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm quoting the people in your government in California.
There is no amount of water pressure in the world through these hydrants that are going to be able to put out 50,000 acres of fire.
Yes,
you did. You're talking about smelt and you're talking about no water pressure.
I didn't say that. If you turn on every hydrant, you know this, you lose water pressure. That's not what I said, by the way.
Let me grant you the larger point, though. And I think the point that you're trying to make, I'll grant you this, even though you don't deserve it and you're just going to spew a bunch of bullshit about smelt and water pressure.
Okay, brother?
But let me grant you the larger point and say that there are still things that people could do. And I'm not here to argue that California did a perfect job or does a perfect job with regard to how they manage all of this stuff. But to that point then, do you think it's maybe a little stupid that Trump would fire 10% of NOAA's workforce, which is about 1,300 staffers and researchers? Do you think it's a good idea then that Trump called for reducing NOAA's workforce by a further 17%, which would be another 2,000 staffers and researchers? Do you think it's a good idea that Trump slashed 20% of FEMA's workforce? Do you think it's a smart idea to phase out FEMA completely? Do you think it's a smart idea that 25% of NWS's stations lack a meteorologist? All of this stuff is planned.
So let's go back to the basics here. If you're asking about the size of government and the president making a decision to reduce the size of government when it makes sense, I have no issue with that. By the way, the staffing and the lies that were put out by many on the left and the media was that there was understaffing when it came to the warnings that were coming out from the National Weather Service. That was a lie. They were staffed above normal staffing levels. They held people over the day before and the night of the storm in Texas. They had double the staff on staff when the storms were hitting. There's a timeline of all the texts that were going out and the warnings that were going out. And so you're acting as if Donald Trump caused a problem with the flood and the response to it in the warning system, which is a lie. When you have double the staff, which is the protocol, by the way, under Obama, under Biden, and under George Bush. So this is nonpartisan and everyone showed up for work and people were held over. You're now just trying to score political points on the lives of dead children for political reasons.
Okay, let me bring in Natalie.
You know, I find it extremely fascinating that liberals haven't tried to blame this on climate change. Why not? Like, climate change is the cause for every other disaster. Oh, hang on. We can blame Donald Trump because Donald Trump is downsizing the size of the federal government because Joe Biden massively increased the size of the federal government. I love this idea that, oh, the sky is going to fall if we fire a few federal employees, right? Like, the federal government has 2.5 million employees. Do we really need that many employees in the federal government? Like, seriously, like, I just love this idea that, oh, all of a sudden, healthcare systems all over the country are falling apart because Donald Trump decided to get rid of 2% of employees for that department. I love it. I just love that idea. Like, they think that because they lose one person over here and one person over there, that all of a sudden these systems are just going to crumble. Right? Not counting the fact that, hang on just a second, Biden increased the size of the federal government by a lot, almost 40%. If all of his plans, the Build Back Better Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure and all these other pieces of legislation that significantly increased the size of the federal government, if that would have all went through and all of those people would have been hired from that set of legislation, would have increased the size of the federal government by 40%. Now, when we're talking 2 million employees, that's a lot. That's a lot of people. Do we really need that many people working in government? I just love this idea. We can't get rid of a few people from the government and the sky is going to fall. Oh, no, it's just an angle that they can try to reach out and grab some blame for Donald Trump and bring it over here and pull it close to their heart. That's all this is about, folks. Don't let the liberal nonsense fool you. Getting rid of 10-15% of the federal workforce, you're not going to see a damn difference. And why do I say that? That's because when the government shuts down, do you notice a difference in your daily life? I'm just saying. Let's keep going.
You should be waiting patiently. Natalie, when I read out what Destiny posted there, what was your feeling about that?
Well, I think that's probably the textbook definition of what it means to be a grifter, trying to profit off of dead children by pumping NordVPN and your promo code. It's reprehensible. I'm
Just to be
pretty
clear, that's
sure
not my
you're an
promo code, and
atheist.
that's
You
not
don't
the
believe
definition
in
of a
God.
grifter.
You certainly
Okay,
don't
fine.
believe in traditional marriage. So I would expect nothing less that you would double down and defend it. Blows my mind. I mean, I agree comedy's important, but I don't think, no offense, maybe you shouldn't be a stand-up comedian if you want to start your career by posting about dead children. It's really not all that funny. And it really wasn't even a joke. You were trying to profit off of it. So I think that's sort of a compounding evilness to what you did.
What do we do, Natalie?
So real quick, for compounding evilness, just so I could read this because it's entered into the record, okay? I'm just curious if Ben wants to say, is this quote fake, okay? So there's hundreds of these quotes, all right? At a county meeting, okay, where the citizens are giving feedback on whether or not they should use the American Rescue Plan funds, all right? Citizen Mr. R says, there's not just a lack of transparency, but the Biden administration is pulling the wool over our eyes. If we see what's actually written, we make a clear decision. This is wrong. Texas has been going in the right direction. I moved from Washington State a year ago. Washington is just falling lockstep with whatever this admin wants to do, and we're watching with clarity the damage. As far as COVID and the recovery money, the majority of the damage has been caused by the government. We're doing well. I'm a retired firefighter, EMS. I love law enforcement.
So
do no harm is going by the wayside. Let me finish one more sentence. Do no harm is going by the wayside from, we're all familiar with that, and it's heartfelt, but it's going by the wayside for now what would be money that would go against everything that we believe. Whatever good is in it, I don't want it. Are you telling me that comment and the hundreds of others like it are fake? Can you give me a yes or no before you ramble about whatever irrelevant stuff is? Are those comments fake?
I'm going to go back to what I want to say. You said what you said. I'm going to say it.
Answer it.
Number one,
this is why you debate kids on college
I'm
campuses,
answering
right?
the damn question, dude. Like, just chill for a second. Drink whatever hemp juice or that is. Okay,
yeah, keep going.
All right. So number one, that's one person. Number two, if you weren't so dumb. If you weren't so dumb, if you weren't
scroll down and find another one if you want.
If you weren't good, you found two. If you weren't so dumb, go Google the size.
You think they don't exist?
Go Google the size of the Comfort, Texas City Hall. You can't fit hundreds of people in any meeting there, you moron. You found one. You act like there's thousands that showed up. They did not show up and say that on the record. Are there people that said things on the internet?
And then the people can go out.
But if you look at how small
you
the
can bring 5 in and 5 out. If you see a room that can only fit 10 people, did you know that 100 people can fit in that room if 10 go in and 10 leave? Do we forget this stuff?
Again, if you understood the size of the town, which you don't because you don't care because you're literally trying to make money off of dead people.
You're the one who's getting kids killed, and I can't wait for the next once-in-a-lifetime disaster in Texas.
You moron.
The next time the power grid freezes, the next time another flood happens, and dipshits like you were up here saying, could we have ever seen it coming? But hey, you know what? At least Marjorie Taylor Greene is out here proposing legislation to stop the Jews from putting clouds in the sky. So thank God we have you guys working hard on the problem, okay, to stop the weather modification program from Bill Gates. Thank God.
You stay up till 3 a.m. and watch the internet?
Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
What I find fascinating about all of this is he's trying to make up this idea that these people, they didn't want to use funds from the federal government to build a system of alarms, right? These gigantic natural disaster alarms up on a pole. I don't know if you guys have seen them. We've got them all around here because I live around a bunch of industrial refineries. So we have to have them in case there's some sort of spill. But I love this idea that he's trying to blame this on the people that were impacted by this flood, the victims of this flood, because they didn't want to use federal money that most certainly would have came with stipulations, and there's not been enough time that these alarms would have even been put in place yet. That wasn't that long ago, as a matter of fact. And these types of projects take years to finish off. So I just love this idea. Plus, you know, that people want to be fiscally responsible with our money. And so now we're going to blame natural disasters because, well, they didn't want to spend the money to do this. Sure, fine, go right ahead. You know, natural disasters happen regardless of any alarm system that you have put in place. Sure, may it save a few lives? Yeah, might. But, you know, if, once again, from what I heard from that guy's clip, from his statement or whatever, it sounds to me like the negatives outweighed any good that may have came with that, right? Like there's always, like I said, there's always stipulations when you get government grants to build whatever it may be. There's always stipulations. And with Biden, there was probably some really, really negatively impacting stipulations in that grant money that they just didn't want to do. They didn't believe in, like morally didn't believe in, right? Like Joe Biden and his administration. It was mostly his administration because we all know that Joe Biden wasn't in charge. Just did not care about money whatsoever. They just thought we could spend our way into oblivion and there would be zero ramifications. Let's just spend as much money as possible, right? Donald Trump had the deficit under $1 trillion throughout his administration. You get to COVID, it bounces up to $3 trillion because of the stimulus package that went out or whatever. That was like $2 trillion and everybody got a couple $1,000 or whatever. So the deficit went up to $3 trillion, right? Now, it should have came back down to where it was before, after that stimulus package, after that fiscal year. But hang on, we had a transition in power. Joe Biden came in. It has never been below $1 trillion ever since. When it came back down, Joe Biden increased by 50% the deficit. Nobody ever talks about this. Joe Biden, from his first fiscal year, increased the deficit by 50%, $1.5 trillion. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit over 50% because the previous deficit was only like 900 and something billion. So he increased it by like 55% or something like that. Well, okay, so COVID was still kind of going on. It was waning off. So you might think, well, it's COVID, right? Sure. Next fiscal year, what was it? $1.7 trillion. Hang on. We didn't stop spending more money or at least keep the deficit the same? They love to blame the national debt on Donald Trump. And, oh, the national debt went up by $7 trillion under Donald Trump, notwithstanding the fact that it also went up $7 trillion under Joe Biden. Like, do we just ignore that fact or something like that? Like, Joe Biden spent a lot of money on a lot of nonsense for nothing in return. As a matter of fact, he dumped so much money into green projects that have never come to fruition. Like, I don't know, like those charging stations that took $9 billion to build, what, 5? Something like that? They allocated, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars for all these charging stations, and they've built like 20 of them at this point. That's it. It's fascinating. So, you know, there's always stipulations that come along with this money. And to blame a disaster on some people because they didn't want an alarm system that came with too many negative stipulations, that they just said, no, it's not worth it. So you're going to blame it on them in a very distasteful way. I think Destiny is sick in the freaking head. Every time he comes on one of these shows, we're always talking about just how deranged Destiny is and just how sick-minded this guy is. I don't know what's gotten into it. I used to have a lot of respect for Destiny, right? He used to be a good debater, right? He was fact-based and he was good. You know, he speaks fast and it's clear and concise, generally speaking, or it used to be, but not anymore. You can't really relate to what Destiny talks about anymore. Like, sure, there's moments and brief periods of coherence, but it's all mixed in with a bunch of jumbled up nonsense that makes you think, what has gotten into this guy? Has he just fried his freaking brain? Sure seems that way, y'all. But it's just fascinating with the federal government and the spending that is going on. And look, they were talking a lot about this, like Republicans failed us. And I ain't gonna lie about that. You know, a lot of people talk about the big beautiful bill or whatever. That was Trump's agenda. And they screwed the pooch on that. Republicans screwed the pooch on that. You know, they took Donald Trump's agenda, and, you know, Donald Trump didn't know any different. He didn't read the freaking bill. This is why he was advocating for it so much, at least I believe. Because he took his agenda items and he thought that was the only thing it was. It was just the big, beautiful bill, his agenda ticket, and mandatory spending. Right, because the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and all that. And we're going to reform that a little bit so we can save a few pennies here and there and get some of the fraud out of the system, because there's a lot of fraud in the system, up to, I think it's 500, estimates are in between 250 to 500 billion just in Medicare and Medicaid. That's not even to mention Social Security, right? There's hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud in Social Security, and they wanted to eliminate that by installing work requirements, which is great. But Congress, they took all these good ideas that would put us on a fiscally responsible course, and then they added a bunch of pork nonsense to this just to get people to vote for it. Say, oh, you want this $100 million for your district, and you want this for your district. And hey, here's a great idea. Let's try to get Democrats to vote for this by adding SALT deductions so red states can subsidize blue states. There you go. And not a single freaking Democrat voted for this. Right? Cutting the funding for Planned Parenthood for only a year. What? Why only a year? Why not make that permanent? You guys don't believe in abortions. Why only a year? None of it makes any sense. And the Senate screwed the pooch because we had a bunch of gun rights issues that were going to be addressed in the big, beautiful bill. That, as a matter of fact, I covered on this channel, talking about the cans and short-barreled rifles and shotguns. You know, they were going to eliminate a $200 tax on these things. And they just the Senate took that out. Like, why? Why? Like, why? There's no reason to eliminate that tax. There's none whatsoever. Zero reason to eliminate that. So that the American population will have to now pay that tax still, right? It's not like we're losing anything, but we lost something we could have gained, in other words. It's fascinating what they do, but I've been rambling for a while, so y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comments section. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. That would be great. Share this video anywhere and everywhere that you can. I would love you to death for that. If you could also look right below the video and click that join button, y'all. Sign up, become a member, help this channel flourish and expand. Y'all do all that for me, and y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.